Realistic Randy is one of the OG callers into Vikings Vent Line. And now he's one of the biggest Vikings YouTube superstars on earth. His Vikings pain is now your game. This is Realistic Randy Rants with Randy and Declan on Purple Daily and Score North.
Realistic Randy Rants on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Usually every Monday on this YouTube channel due to the holidays and things shaking out. Vikings playing on Saturdays. We moved this to a Tuesday episode. But Realistic Randy, we can't even get a Christmas miracle. Well, we got a Christmas miracle from Greg Joseph, but not a Christmas present of just, hey, I know what I want for Christmas, all right? Like, I went into this game, the Giants game, like, I want this for Christmas. I just want to win. I want a convincing win. And no, we're going to have to work for this Christmas present, right? You're going to have to really bite tooth and nail, be extra good for 365 days a year to get the actual present you want, which for me, Randy, was my guy, Greg Joseph, drilling a 61-yard field goal.
Yep, you got it.
61-yard field goal. I can't tell you, Randy. I haven't had, in my young sports broadcasting career, a much more validating feeling. We've all been there on some things, right? Like, oh, I knew this was going to happen, and I'm happy that it proves me right. I will confidently say Greg Joseph drilling the 61-yard field goal, me and the Greg Joseph family being the only ones standing for him all season, and the fact that he is the one who drills it, and the fact that I was the one to say stay patient, was a very selfishly a satisfying early Christmas present for me to see Greg Joseph walk off the New York Giants.
Congratulations, Declan. You've been waiting for this moment all season long. You stood tall in the face of adversity when people like myself said it's over, but he stepped up the last two games. In fact, the Vikings as a whole, I think you mentioned this earlier as far as we're looking for that convincing win. It's over, man. At this point, one of the greatest projects that Netflix ever put together was Black Mirror. Black Mirror, in case those that haven't seen it, it's a series to where when you think you know, you have no idea. Every episode is different, a whole new cast of characters. The plot is never the same. And right when you think, okay, I have it figured out, at the end, you're saying to yourself, wow, did not see that coming. That, in a sense, is the 2022 Minnesota Vikings. We are now 15 games in, 12-3. Every game we're saying, man, this team is lucky. But at this point, 15 out of 17 games played, this is just who they are. Every reasonable measurement that you would typically use for any other NFL team in any other time, you can throw it out the window when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings. Nothing applies here. It's pure chaos. You have a receiver who's breaking a record every week he plays. You have a tight end who starts the game off with a drop and then finishes with over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. You have a defense that prior to Saturday, Daniel Jones completed or got an average of under 200 yards per game passing. Against Minnesota on Saturday, 334.
Yeah.
A defense that's so bad, 5th worst in scoring, an offensive line that started the season off with a lot of promise, but now is just as bad as it was in years prior. But I think the quarterback-receiver combo that you have now is enough to weather the storm that is everything that goes wrong with the Vikings. It's very, to a degree, Dante Culpepper and Randy Moss like. And when Justin Jefferson scored the touchdown to make it an 8-point game with just about 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, I said, all right, that's it. We're good. Pack it up. And then Saquon Barkley, he brought us back down to earth, tying it 24-all. And the fact that you had Greg Joseph at the end, first off, that quarterback-receiver combo, going back to that quickly, that final drive, 2 big third down conversions, both going to Justin Jefferson. And my thing that I said last week is that what I'm looking for, win or lose, is that can you stay in this game? Don't get caught up in the emotional win that was last week, the Indianapolis Colts. You have to move on. Don't let the letdown game happen. And they did it. You went from the largest comeback in NFL history to winning this week off of a 61-yard walk-off field goal by Greg Joseph, your boy. Congratulations. Nothing makes sense when it comes to this team, and I'm here for it. I think this is going to be one of those things where when I'm old, when we're old, we have grandkids, they say, Grandpa, tell us about the 2022 Vikings. Say, oh, listen here. Let me tell you something right now. There so many wacky games. You had the catch on 4th and 18 against Buffalo. came back from down 33-0 at halftime, 61-yard walk-off field goal. They're going to say, Mom, Dad, Grandpa's talking crazy again. They're not going to believe it. It doesn't make any sense, but I am here for this season. This is the wackiest team I've ever seen in my life.
You know, it's funny. You know, a lot of generations of Vikings fans associate certain seasons with how that season played out. You know, 98 being the prolific offense. 2000 was a decent year, but it was mostly 41 donut that fans remember more. The 09 Favre run, 2017 with Case Keenum and them having the Minneapolis Miracle. This season, we haven't had a postseason failure yet, and we're hoping that obviously as we go on, we'll have a better chapter to write. But this season in itself, and yeah, there's still 2 games left, is one of the most memorable of my lifetime. To your point, that you just pointed out the Bills game, the Giants game, the Colts game. There are so many moments here where we can be like, oh, you have no idea. Even though this wasn't a playoff game, this is one of the craziest games I've ever witnessed, and it wasn't a high leverage game necessarily. It was just in the regular season, and they ended up winning in the wackiest fashions. That is kind of interesting because everyone has their memories of certain years, and we don't know how this one's going to play out yet because we haven't got to the postseason. But it already has shaped up as to be legitimately, and I just turned 30 years old, one of the most memorable seasons of my lifetime already.
It's only lucky if it happens in spurts, a couple of moments. But if it routinely happens game after game after game, this is just who they are. I've never seen anything like this before, not just with the Vikings, but any team for that matter. Maybe the 09 Saints, where they had a terrible defense as well, but they forced a lot of turnovers, and they definitely got lucky in the playoffs, the NFC Championship game, where the refs just cheated. Not only did the Saints cheat, the refs, they sat there, and mind you, this is Brett Favre, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. This is, a year or two after Tom Brady tore his ACL. So after that, there was an emphasis on, okay, roughing the passer. Anything we see, you could tap Tom Brady on the shoulder, say, hey, man, good job, and that's roughing the passer. Yeah. That whole game, nothing. I've never seen anything like this ever. So this is a season of destiny. I'm tired of sitting back and saying, okay, this is what we can reasonably expect, because what we can expect up to this point now and moving forward the rest of this year is the unexpected. I don't know what every game, there's something new to where you say, wow, that's crazy. Did not see that happening. And we went from Greg Joseph. Do I owe Greg Joseph an apology? No, I do not. The man had 5 missed extra point attempts in the league at one point. He has, both things can be true, to where he was a disaster and he has improved to where now maybe he's becoming reliable when you need him the most. So good for him.
Randy, let's get back into this Giants game here quickly. Obviously, a big game for Justin Jefferson and a huge game for TJ Hockenson. Both these guys had a combined 32 targets between the two. They ended up hauling 25 catches for well over 200 plus yards. It is clear that TJ Hockenson has kind of emerged here as the second weapon before we get to Justin Jefferson and his dominance. I mean, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, this first draft might be a little murky to start here, but as I've kind of said, I think it makes up for it to a degree with the acquisition of Hockenson midseason, because it's not even a debate right now that TJ Hockenson is the second best weapon in this offense, and it's not close.
That's what I've been waiting for this whole time, ever since we traded from him from Detroit, or traded for him from Detroit. I was saying, man, this is going to be the de facto number 2 option, and it's not even going to be close. And it's been okay. Get 60 yards, 70 yards here, maybe a touchdown every game or two. But you know what? To have over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that catch he made, the second score that he had where he mossed 2 Giants defenders to get into the end zone, it was that game back and forth. But that specific play, it took me everything not to shout, because I was recording in a hotel room at the time for the after game reaction. It took everything for me not to shout and say, oh my God, are you kidding me? But if he continues on that trajectory to where, you know what? Yes, everyone's going to be keyed up on Jefferson. But then after a while, you forget, oh, that's right. They also have TJ Hockenson as well, who is an intermediate threat. And you still have Adam Thielen for cleanup. And whatever you get from KJ Osborne, that's fine. But that's the version of TJ Hockenson that I've been waiting for. And I hope we see it the rest of this regular season and into the playoffs. As far as Justin Jefferson, you had something to say about him?
Oh, no, I was going to say about Hockenson that just his emergence and what he's able to provide to this Vikings offense is huge. Like, is he on the Travis Kelce tier of like an elite tight end? Maybe not, because Travis Kelce's just that damn good. But is he in that number one guys of second tier tight ends? Absolutely. He's a top 5 tight end. He's probably the 5th or 4th best tight end in the NFL right now. And you got him under team control at least for another season. You can possibly even lock him up to a long-term extension after the 5th-year option kicks in. I just love what he's able to bring, man. Because look, Adam Thielen is still a good red zone guy, but he's lost a step. KJ Osborne, we still don't know if there's an emergence there, or if he is just a wide receiver 3. It is clear that TJ Hockenson, though, is the second best weapon in this offense.
Absolutely. And the man is still young. Like you said, he has the Vikings, they have team control at least through next season. We'll see what happens after that. But he's 25 years old right now. So if you combine that with Justin Jefferson, 2 guys that are in their youth who may not have necessarily tapped into their prime yet, which with Justin Jefferson, that's ridiculous to think about. But that's a building block for the future to where you can say, okay, even if Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook, if they eventually move on, we can still add other pieces. But that is a solid-ass foundation for this team moving forward. But I just want to see consistency from him, because that first drop he had to start the game, I said, oh, boy, here we go. Come on, man. You gotta live up to all the hype that you've been getting. But to finish with over 102 TDs, if he can continue to be more consistent, then look out.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, too, with a humongous day. 12 catches, 133 yards, a touchdown. This is where he obviously had a big presence. He had a huge presence yesterday, and he's had a huge presence all season. He broke Randy Moss's single-season record already. He's on track to potentially break the NFL record for receiving yards. I want to ask you something about that later on in the podcast. But still, longest reception, 25 yards. Yes, he has a clutch touchdown, but just even 12 catches, $133, and it just... It sometimes like flies under my head that, oh my God, he had 12 catches, 133 yards, just because they feed him. They feed him all the time. He finds his way to get open. He finds ways to make big plays just like he did to set up the field goal. His just presence on the field is so damn good. And it is one of the best Vikings players we honestly have ever seen in a long time. And he obviously breaks Randy Moss's record, but just watching him play football week in and week out, it's incredible what the guy does.
It's almost, dare I say, I know it's apples to oranges, but it's almost, dare I say, like a running back. He's not going off for 50, 60-yard catches like Tyreek Hill seems like every week. It's death by 5,000 paper cuts to where he's getting 15 yards. He's getting 20 yards here. And it just adds up to where you don't see that monstrous catch each game to where you say, oh, he really ended up with 12 for 133 and a score. I don't remember that happening. But the thing is, with 2 games remaining, already the franchise single season record holder for receptions and yardage. Current league leader in receiving yards by over 100 at 1756. Also in receptions by a 10-count lead. The rate he's going, 2K, is still very much possible. Needs to average 105 the last 2 games to break Calvin Johnson's record. And I think he's going to do it. And here's what I'm going to say. When we talk about or think about most valuable player, this should be a 3-man race. Okay. This should be Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Justin Jefferson. And it's fun to talk about and speculate, but we know good and well he's never going to get it. A wide receiver. Cooper Kupp didn't get it last year. We know Justin Jefferson isn't going to get it this year. But the Vikings, they are 12-3 primarily because of 18. He needs to get at least a third of the vote, I would say, between those 3. But my goodness, I just love how the MVP award is now just a quarterback's honor. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, MVP, that's for quarterbacks. The rest of you peasants, the other skill positions, you can fight over offensive player of the year, which he will win that at least. But I just feel like the dominance that he has right now, the fact that every game, I feel like this is the 4th or 5th game we've said on this show to where, man, over 100+ yards, and you don't really remember it because that one catch wasn't there. It was just a combination of so many plays that he made over the course of a 4-quarter game. 117 yards per game. League leader. Check this out. He's the league leader in 3rd down catches, resulting in 1st downs. Buffalo, they don't win that game without the catch. He should be in the conversation for MVP, the dominance that he has. And he's in his 3rd year. Are you kidding me? The sky is the limit for this guy. He's really only going to get better. That's crazy.
And look, Kirk Cousins deserves a ton of credit for game-winning drives this season. His stats have fallen off from the Kirk degree, but there's been a new gear to him where we kind of say, okay, we can take some of the bad statistics if it means he's clutch in the end. And just to prove how much Kirk even goes to Justin Jefferson, I saw this note floating around Twitter that Justin Jefferson has 168 receiving yards on the 8 game-winning drives that Kirk has delivered this season.
Wow.
The rest of the Vikings team has 195. So again, 8 catches for Jefferson, 168 yards during those 8 game-winning drives that Kirk has orchestrated. The rest of the team, 195 yards. So this isn't even like, I would say this. Kirk might have a better case for MVP if they were taking away Jefferson and he was still able to orchestrate some game-winning drives, finding a KJ Osborne and finding other guys open. Justin Jefferson is just so damn good that no one can really cover him. I mean, it might get to a point. Remember when Megatron had the monster year and even at his peak, they were legitimately bracket 2 guys? They would just put 2 guys next to Megatron and dare Matthew Stafford to throw to whoever hell he wanted to. It's going to have to probably come to that point. It's going to come to the same point that when the Vikings drafted Randy Moss, that the very next draft you had the Packers and Bears and Lions loading up on DBs, right? Because, well, we just got to stop this guy and he's killing us. I think I agree with you that Justin Jefferson deserves more of the MVP share. And look, the Kirk stands will shout that, how are you moving the goalposts here? No, this is a great weapon for Kirk. He's feeding him. And Kevin O'Connell also deserves a lot of credit. It's like this 3-headed monster, basically, that has been happening here with KOC, Kirk Cousins, and Justin Jefferson, where Kirk has been basically infiltrated by KOC to say, trust your best playmaker. You don't have to check it down to Conklin. You don't have to just do the out route to CJ Ham. Force a tight ball and let your dude make the biggest play possible, which we've seen against the Bills. We saw it for a big touchdown, obviously, last week against the Giants. It's a 3-headed monster, but on that monster of the pie chart, if you will, to your point, Jefferson does deserve the biggest amount of credit there.
Yes, and I understand if we want to say, well, Kirk deserves to be in the conversation for MVP as well. Sure, we can go ahead and make that argument. However, Justin Jefferson is the lead guy. But it's interesting, though, speaking on Kirk Cousins, I think if you're in sports content creation and you cover an entire league, I think it's very difficult to be aware of fine-tooth combing every single team to know the intricacies with each organization. So I see it all the time on ESPN or elsewhere to where, okay, they break down each game. They may forget about a player or two, or they may overvalue or underestimate another player on that particular team. So it's really hard to keep up with all 32 teams in the league. I think the opposite can be true as far as if we're focused on one team as we are, the Minnesota Vikings. I think it can also be true that sometimes we may not understand or be unaware of the impact a player may have around the rest of the league. So Kirk Cousins, for example, do you know the only quarterback better than Kirk Cousins in the NFC, Jalen Hurts, who happens to be an MVP candidate? It doesn't just stop there. League-wide, I've talked about Kirk Cousins. This is a top 10 quarterback. I've said that for a couple of years. Top 10, but closer towards the 10 mark, towards the end.
Yeah.
This year, he's top 5. I think he's the 5th best quarterback in the NFL. The 4 quarterbacks I have ahead of him, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen. Kirk Cousins comes in 5th. Also, something else that sticks out. In the 4th quarter this year, Kirk Cousins, 1st in passing yards, 2nd in first downs, 1st in touchdowns. He's delivering when his team needs him the most, Justin Jefferson or not. And you know what? He's not the MVP of this team. It's Justin Jefferson, but he's doing a damn good job. And that is going back to the Black Mirror comparison. It's so crazy. He's having probably a better year as far as impact for this team than last year when I thought he had a better statistical season last year. It is absolutely insane to go from top 10 to now top 5. Who in the NFC besides Jalen Hurts are you taking ahead of Kirk Cousins? Nobody. He's better than all of them.
You know, you bring up a good point that QB lists are always subjective. You know, some people might have Kirk 8th, some guys might have him 12th. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. The 4 guys that are ahead of him right now, the 3 in the AFC, obviously, in Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow, Jalen Hurts in the NFC, right? I think those are probably the only 4 guys that I can definitively say, yes, I would take them above Kirk. Because once you get in, so like, I don't know if you rank those guys below Kirk, but once you get into the Kirks, the Daks, everyone else below him. I know Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert are emerging here, and they're probably the next class that props up into them. But after that, after those 4 guys above them that you listed, I'm with you. Like, I don't think there is any other quarterback that I can definitively say I would trust right now to win me a game more. No, will Trevor Lawrence potentially have a better career than Kirk Cousins? He could. Sure. Will Justin Herbert? He could. But in terms of the 2022 framework right now, I don't know if I trust those guys to have the Vikings at 12-3 below him. I don't know if Justin Herbert can do that. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence can do that. I know that from the body of work that I've seen from those teams this year, that what Kirk has done in the game-winning drives, it deserves a ton of credit. And we can nitpick that, but Lawrence is the future and Herbert are the future, sure, and all this. We can do that. That's fine. If you want to have a long-term game, that's a different conversation. In terms of what has transpired in 2022 and what Kirk has delivered in those moments, I can definitively say Kirk is better than those guys right now. Absolutely.
And the thing is, we're talking about right now. And right now, you mentioned Dak Prescott earlier, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Justin Herbert, 21-10. Kirk Cousins, 27-11. And in his defense, going back to that Colts game, the 2 interceptions that he threw, those were both on Jalen Reagor. The first interception to where it looked like he just had a brain fart and just stopped. And then at the last second threw his arm up, whatever. And then on the second one, he just gave up on his route. Kirk Cousins should be worst case scenario right now, 27-9. You look at these other quarterbacks and Geno Smith, not far off with 27 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. You have these Tom Brady. He's better than him. Who thought we would ever say that right now? But it's one of those things to where, I understand Kirk can be so annoying at times when often or every now and then he'll check down on a 3rd and long, or he misses passes to where looks like he's skipping rocks on a pond where it just hits the foot of the receiver. He can be annoying, but I think because it's so easy to just focus on that and not realizing what's happening around the rest of the league, he's a top 5 quarterback. And I had to look that up before we recorded this podcast as far as preparing for this show, to where I said, who would I really take? He clears everybody else. He clears the NFC North. He's better than Aaron Rodgers. He clears the NFC West, the NFC South, basically everybody except for 4 other quarterbacks in the league. It's crazy.
Randy, before we get to the defensive side of the ball here, anything else on offense that stood out to you that the Vikings were able to do on Sunday against the Giants?
Not specifically against the Giants, but I will say this. Going back into Kirk Cousins, defending him right now, this man is putting up dope-ass numbers despite getting sacked the 3rd most in the league, 44 times. That is, and still putting up those numbers, that's incredible as far as the toughness and the durability of Kirk Cousins. We have to now look at, okay, is this guy, every single year we go through this, all right, do you keep him? Do you go for someone else? You know, it's funny. This offseason, I think this was when, okay, let's look at all the other different quarterback options out there as far as, okay, let's trade for this guy or let's sign this guy and use the cap savings elsewhere that you would give to Kirk Cousins. All those quarterbacks right now, none of them are in the conversation as far as, okay, is your team even in the playoffs? Baker Mayfield, he's on his 2nd team in the same year now with the LA Rams. And yes, he looks good with the Rams, but come on, they have nothing to play for. We'll see what happens when, let's say, he gets a starting job elsewhere next year. We'll see then. But Russell Wilson, that's another guy who, and I think anybody else in the league or all fan bases across the country, they would have said, Russell Wilson, heck yeah, let's go ahead and get this guy. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. Now we went from Russell Wilson, he's definitely going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, but we went from Russell Wilson, this dude's a beast, oh my God, top 10, whatever, to now we have to look at Pete Carroll and his legacy to say, okay, was it him all along that made him great in the first place? But the interior offensive line has fell apart. We thought it had promise with Ed Ingram, Garrett Bradbury. He's been hurt. Austin Slotman, he's been okay. Ezra Cleveland, he's been up and down all season long. But the fact that the offensive line has not supported the quarterback that that he as a pure pocket passer needs, taking all the hits and still standing tough in the pocket and delivering these throws and getting these wins, that's, you know what? Hats off to him.
Hey, by the way, our crazy Canadian Cousins Crusaders. Let's shout out them really quick. You can donate by going to scorenorth.com, keyword Cousins. This will lead you right to the Julian Kirk Cousins Foundation page. And when you donate to the Kirk Cousins cause, mention Purple Daily, mention you heard it on Score North to help out the crazy Canadian Cousins Crusaders. We just talked up Kirk Cousins for the last 10 minutes on this show. So shout out to our friends, the crazy Canadian Cousin Crusaders. Go to scorenorth.com, keyword Cousins to donate to the Kirk Cousins and Julie Cousins Foundation. Randy, on the defensive side of the ball, Danielle Hunter, a monster day, one of his biggest games in a long, long time. 3 sacks, ton of pressures. He was schemed all over the field. I saw times where he was lining up as the outside linebacker. There was times he was even lining up inside on the line with a hand on the ground. It just seemed like they finally figured out the way that they utilized Danielle Hunter against the Giants is the way we've always wanted to see Danielle Hunter utilized. He had a monster day against New York.
We've wanted to see multiple fronts for a while, and that's what Ed Donatel propped up during this past offseason. 3-4, 4-3. You're going to see a whole bunch of everything. I'm going to throw out my whole bag, damn it. And we haven't really seen that. Is he back? That is the question, though. So he had, 2 sacks against the Giants. He's had, 3.5 the last 2 games. What's crazy is any other pass rushing tandem, when you say they both have double-digit sacks on the year with 2 games left to go, you would say, man, that's amazing. That's awesome. But I think the difference here is that, yes, Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, they have over 10 or above sacks each. But I think the thing is, what I'm used to seeing from Danielle Hunter on a consistent basis is, okay, even if he doesn't get a sack, sure, he'll get a sack in his heyday on a 4-3 defensive end set. But even if he doesn't get the sack, it's one of those you have to watch him every single play to where, man, he didn't get the sack, but he was right there. Oh, my goodness. It's one of those Clash of the Titans situations. But the difference this year is that he'll get a sack here or there, and then he's kind of floating around the rest of the game. Against the Giants, he was everywhere. I want to say part of it is because of the extra pressure that Donatel is bringing, but I think also because you need to have a legit 3-man front on the defensive line. I think having Khyiris Tonga, this man is bringing it. At one of the sacks that Danielle Hunter got, Tonga was out there. I think, especially if you have just Tomlinson and, Harrison Phillips, that's great in itself, but you need that third guy. If you have a weak link on the defensive line in a 3-4 set, that's going to cause all holy hell. As long as you have a legit front, that can make things easier for your outside linebackers who, if you're going to continue that, okay, but you need to have a defensive line that can really get after it. And now that you have Tonga out there, they're bringing more pressure. This defense is still one of the worst in the league. The fact that you gave up over 300 plus yards to Daniel Jones, who before this game had completed, averaged less than 200 yards per game, is still something to where you say, okay, Donatel, he still needs to go. I don't know if he's back yet, Danielle Hunter. I just want to see him be more consistent. But maybe Tonga can bring that to the table to make things easier for him.
Here's a note that I actually was pretty surprised by. The last time the Vikings had 2 players with double-digit sack totals in the same season, you actually have to go all the way back to 2004 when it was Kevin Williams and Lance Johnstone. Yeah,
wow.
And they've had plenty of pass rushers to complement Kevin, Jared Allen, Ray Edwards. But the last time they had 2 players with double-digit and more was all the way back in 2004 with Kevin Williams and Lance Johnstone. Obviously, Danielle and Zadarius Bell both have 10 sacks each. The Vikings are one of 3 teams currently in the NFL to have duos with at least 10 sacks this season. And yeah, look, the Vikings defense is going to give up the passing yards. That's clear. That's clear. That's how this defense is schemed for right now. But if those 2 dudes, Zadarius and Danielle Hunter, are schemed in the correct ways, you're moving them all over the field here. I think Ed Donatel deserves some credit, and I know Kevin O'Connell was the one who probably breathing down his neck saying, dude, time to make some changes here. And I think even Mark Schlereth said those 2 met and said, here's how I would plan against your own defense. Here's how I'm Kevin O'Connell with my offense. Here's how I would attack your defense. And there was some tweaks here. And I know Danny Dimes still had like a monster day. But outside of that, there was moments in that Vikings game where you saw a defense that can have a recipe for success. You saw them pressuring the quarterback a lot. Some key turnovers that were made, obviously, from Patrick Peterson. And then Duke Shelley continues to play really, really well out of nowhere. Obviously, you just mentioned Tonga. And to go back to Kwesi kind of whiffing on draft picks here, or at least early on, or the jury's still being out on them, he found 2 really good claims and trades in Tonga and Duke Shelley, who have all of a sudden turned into really good players for the Vikings.
And that's the thing. After that draft, I was so down on Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, but I do have to give him credit as far as the acquisitions he's made since then. Duke Shelley, Tonga, the trade for TJ Hockenson, those have been key players to the Vikings' success up to this point. Patrick Peterson, I love the fact that he was getting roasted early on by Hodgins, but the fact that he got that interception to get the last laugh on the receiver, I said to myself, good for you. We need to see more of that. But I think the thing is, going back to Donatel, is that, yes, Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, they each have over 10 sacks on the year, but we could see more from them. What we saw on the Giants game or from the Colts game, especially from Danielle Hunter, you can see that more consistently. These are two guys who, at their very best, they can easily combined get you close to 30 sacks. Now, goodness, unless they get another 5 sacks, goodness, the next 2 games to end the season, I don't think that's going to happen. Obviously, it's not, but the point is you can see more from them. And specifically, as far as what we need to see from defense, you're going up against the Packers this week, week 17. They're a little bit hot right now. Christian Watson is a lot better than what we saw in week 1, where he had that clear drop for what would have been a touchdown. He's a lot better now. How is the defense going to respond this time at Lambeau Field? Because they're playing to inch their way into the playoffs. They need a lot of help as well, but the defense needs to be on point. Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, them two alone, which is crazy to think about, Culpepper, Randy Moss, to where they carried the teams when I became a fan. They can do enough to get you another victory. They've shown that up to this point, but you need to see more consistency from this defense.
Let's get into the Vikings-Packers game, obviously, this Sunday at Lambeau Field here, Randy. Obviously, the Packers now have won a few games. They put themselves back in playoff contention to a degree. They still kind of control their destiny. And right now, the Vikings are underdogs against a Packers team that has 5 wins less than the Vikings. So the weather looks like actually it'll be decent for Green Bay standards. I think like in the early or in the low 30s, excuse me. So not a lot of freezing cold, but still you're going outside. You're gonna be playing a football game in Lambeau Field in January. When the Vikings are going into this Packers game, is this the end? Is this the end of the Aaron Rodgers led little comeback here? Are they going to put the nail in the coffin and basically bury the Green Bay Packers? Will the Vikings still have their hands full with this Green Bay Packers team who's playing better? What are your thoughts going into this game?
I think they should win this game. The thing is about this Vikings team too, I think they're going to win. But the thing is about this Vikings team is that they can literally smash anybody. They can also get smashed by anybody as well. This team, the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, it's going to be cold. They're going to rely on their run game. They like to go to the outlet passes. Aaron Jones. You also got A.J. Dillon as well. You have to really control the run. So what we saw last Saturday, Saquon Barkley and the Giants, not great. And he had, 14 carries for a little over 80 yards and that touchdown to tie the game 24-all. They are really going to go nose to nose as far as bruising style with their running backs. You have to be able to stop them. So as long as you can get pressure up front and basically, I can't believe I'm saying this, but force Aaron Rodgers. He's not the same quarterback. He's not the same MVP caliber quarterback he was last year. Force Aaron Rodgers to beat you with his arm. You're going to give yourselves a chance. Now, being at Green Bay, it's a tough environment. I get all that, but this team is much better than Green Bay is right now.
It is pretty wild because I think if the Packers run the ball effectively with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, that Vikings defense is going to get gashed. Now, if they can figure out a way to stop that run and to your point, for maybe the first time ever, make Aaron Rodgers pass the ball, which is hilarious, but with his frustrations with receivers and code words and all this weird, wacky stuff. I mean, I was watching obviously the Christmas Day game against the Dolphins, and I believe Dillon fumbled near the goal line. They were able to recover the ball. It was fine, but you just saw how pissed Aaron Rodgers was at A.J. Dillon for not corralling that football. His frustration is at a high level, and I get it. Rodgers has had an up and down year. He has this team potentially now backdooring themselves into the playoffs by stringing together a few wins here, but it would be great for the Vikings' sake that you started off this season in your most convincing win at home by beating the Packers for your most convincing win all year. And now you have a chance here with Green Bay stumbling after the first 2 months of the season. Now they're playing a bit better to basically bury their playoff hopes and end, honestly, potentially, the Aaron Rodgers tenure in Green Bay. I mean, think about that, too. I know Rodgers got his Super Bowl, and they've had some playoff utility here of a few years in NFC Championship games, but it could be the Vikings that are the final nail in the coffin of Aaron Rodgers' tenure in Green Bay, and I find that fascinating.
You know, I watched that game as well, Packers-Dolphins, and what's interesting is this opened my eyes to one main thing. It's crazy how stats can really cover up a lot of mishaps. Tua Tagovailoa This man, first off, the Packers barely beat the Dolphins. Final score 26-20. But you see Tua's stats overall for the year. I mean, my goodness, he's thrown for almost 3,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. On the surface, that looks great. He was terrible against the Packers. He threw 3 interceptions, at least 2 of them, maybe all 3, but at least 2 of them where a receiver wasn't even in sight. He just threw it straight to the Packers defender. And because it's easy, I think, based off of what I saw, I'm like, this is who Tua really is. If they're not running the ball in Miami, he's throwing to either Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. That's it. So what I would say, based off of seeing just that, Kirk Cousins, be better, be less predictable than Tua. And I think he'll do that for sure. If that is the case, the Vikings, they should absolutely win this game because he will spread the ball around. And the fact that they barely beat them 26-20 is all right, man. Listen, your playoff hopes, they're still alive right now, but the Vikings, they should absolutely end it next week.
Got one more question for you here before we wrap up on Realistic Randy Rants, but a shout out to Park Tavern, the sports bar of the sports dad, Judd Zolgad, located off 390 or off Louisiana Avenue and Minnetonka Boulevard there in St. Louis Park. Go check them out for events. Go check them out. They're open 365 days a year. Great spot to grab a cold one or grab some wings as well. Go check out Park Tavern in St. Louis Park. All right, Realistic Randy, let me paint a picture here. Let's say the Vikings beat the Packers, and the Niners indeed hold off the Raiders. They win their both respective games. The Vikings go into the final week of the season, 1 game up on San Francisco, but they'd have to stay 1 game up because if these 2 teams tie, then that means the 49ers will get the 2 seed. Vikings fall down due to conference record and whatnot. So if the Vikings have to go into that Chicago game, do they have to play their starters for all 4 quarters? Like, is that the path here? Or is there a plan too where maybe you get up early and get the backups in? But unless San Francisco stumbles against the Raiders, which I would be surprised by, but if that happens, that's the only path where I see the final game of the regular season being a Nick Mullins and every backup possible game, because playing on Soldier Field in late January on that GD turf, that late in the season with injuries potentially lingering into the wild card weekend, I don't want any of that smoke, but I will probably be doing some scoreboard watching in the Niners and Raiders game because it has humongous implications on how the Vikings could potentially rest their starters for a week from now in Chicago.
Well, the thing is, it depends on if you have a good enough lead going into the 4th quarter against Chicago. You're going to have to play your starters for the rest of the season, just about, for if you're the Minnesota Vikings, not only because of the 49ers, they're breathing down your necks for that 2 seed, but also I know this is a bit far-fetched, so trying to hold on to that 2 seed, but also don't look now. Yeah. But Jalen Hurts possibly in doubt for next week going up against the New Orleans Saints. They just lost to the Dallas Cowboys 40-34 for that 1 seed. So the Vikings, whether it's to hold on to the 2 seed or possibly get the 1 seed, I think you're going to have to play it all the way through, even all 4 quarters against the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for the Vikes to rest their starters. Here's another actually scenario for you. Let's say the Niners lose and the Vikings win this week, and JJ doesn't have the record for the NFL receiving yard record, but he has, a big game against Green Bay. I think he needs 244, right, by the end of the regular season to beat Megatron. So let's say on Sunday against the Packers, he goes for like $150, $160, and then he only needs, 80, 90 yards potentially to break the record. Do you put Justin Jefferson out there to break the record, or you just say, hey, dude, rest up and get ready for wildcard weekend?
I know this is going to be bad, and it's going to sound like I'm not a Vikings fan and whatever, but honestly, I would rest Justin Jefferson. I'd love the record to be broken. I would absolutely love to see it, but this is still the game of football. It is a violent sport. And you remember, what was this? This was against the Colts. 33-0, came back, largest comeback in NFL history against the Colts. At one point, Jefferson was on the ground, right? Just laying flat on the ground. And I said, oh my goodness, this is and luckily he came back in the game shortly after that. This is still a game where every play he's out there, there's a risk. So if he's going to be out there, your best players, if they're going to be out there, there needs to be something valuable to gain. Now, I know one could make the argument, well, it's a record. That's super valuable to gain. But as far as team accomplishment, if you've already got the 2 seed locked up, and the 1 seed, Philadelphia, all they need to do is win one more game and it's over with for them, then no, I wouldn't play Jefferson. No, I wouldn't, even for the record.
All right, that'll do it for Realistic Randy Rants on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Obviously, we'll be back here next Monday to recap the Vikings and Packers game, and we'll figure out if the Vikings are resting starters or they have to indeed play up a game to stay ahead of the 49ers, and we're getting closer to playoff preview time, too. So fun stuff happening here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button for daily Minnesota Vikings entertainment. This has been Realistic Randy Rants. We'll be back at you next week.